Picture this. You're at a stoplight in your perfectly maintained 1995 Mercedes, and next to you pulls up someone in a brand new luxury SUV. They glance over with that look. You know the one. But here's what they don't understand. You're not driving this car because you can't afford newer. You're driving it because you genuinely don't care what they think. This is the contrarian mindset, and it's fascinating from a psychological perspective. People who drive old Mercedes typically score remarkably high on what psychologists call psychological independence. They've developed an internal compass that guides their decisions rather than external pressures. When everyone else is chasing the latest model, they're going the opposite direction with complete confidence. There's actually a term for what they're doing. It's called reverse status signaling. Instead of shouting about wealth with a new car, they're whispering something more subtle. They're saying, "I'm secure enough in myself that I don't need your approval." And honestly, that takes a special kind of psychological strength. Research shows these individuals have low susceptibility to advertising. While most people feel that nagging pull when they see a commercial for the newest vehicle, old Mercedes drivers barely register it. Their brains are wired differently when it comes to social influence. They've built up what we might call immunity to peer pressure. This isn't stubbornness, it's something deeper. It's intrinsic motivation at work. They're not motivated by what others think they should want. They're motivated by what genuinely matters to them. Quality, reliability, authenticity. And that's a rare psychological trait in our modern world. Here's something most people don't realize. When you buy something new, your brain gets a hit of dopamine. It feels good for maybe a week or two, then it fades. You're already looking at the next thing. But people who drive old Mercedes experience dopamine differently. They get it from keeping something running perfectly, from maintaining excellence. This is what psychologists call functional attachment. It's not about the shiny new feeling, it's about the deep satisfaction of owning something truly well made. These cars were built in an era when Mercedes wasn't cutting corners. Every part was engineered to last decades, and the people who drive them recognize that. There's a concept called emotional obsolescence. It's when companies make you feel like your perfectly good product is outdated. Your phone still works, but suddenly it feels old because there's a newer version. Most people fall for this. Old Mercedes drivers don't. They've somehow developed resistance to this psychological trick. Think about it this way. Modern cars are designed to last maybe 10 years before major problems start. Old Mercedes owners are driving cars from the 80s and 90s that still run beautifully. That's not luck. That's German over-engineering. And appreciating that requires a different way of thinking. These people value mastery over novelty. They'd rather spend a Saturday afternoon doing maintenance than signing papers for a new car loan. They find genuine pleasure in understanding how things work, in keeping something alive that others would throw away. Their brains are wired to appreciate depth and quality in ways that our disposable culture has trained most of us to forget. Your car says something about who you are. We all know this. But for most people, it's about projecting an image. For old Mercedes drivers, it's different. It's about expressing something real. Psychologists call this symbolic self-completion. We use objects to communicate our identity to the world. But here's the interesting part. People who drive old Mercedes aren't trying to complete themselves. They're already complete. The car is just an honest reflection of values they already hold. These individuals typically have what's called a strong internal locus of control. That means they believe their life is shaped by their own choices, not by what others expect. They don't need a new car to feel successful. They don't need anyone's approval to feel confident. Their sense of self comes from within. Research shows they often score high on openness to experience and conscientiousness. They're curious people who appreciate history and craftsmanship. They're also disciplined enough to maintain something that requires real attention. And interestingly, they tend to score low on neuroticism. They're not anxious about what others think. This is authentic self-expression at its purest. When everyone else is leasing the same 3 luxury brands to fit in, these people are saying something different. They're saying, "I know who I am, and I don't need to prove anything."
There's real psychological freedom in that. Most of us spend energy managing how others perceive us. We buy things to signal status or belonging. But old Mercedes drivers have moved past that stage. They've developed a secure self-concept that doesn't require external validation, and you can feel that confidence when you talk to them. You've probably heard of the marshmallow experiment. Researchers gave kids one marshmallow and a choice: eat it now or wait 15 minutes and get two. The kids who waited went on to have better life outcomes decades later. Old Mercedes drivers are the kids who waited. Owning a vintage Mercedes requires serious patience. Parts take time to arrive. Repairs can't always happen immediately. You might need to research and learn before you can fix something. Most people can't handle that. They want instant solutions. But these owners have developed a different relationship with time. Their brains process rewards differently. When most people think about buying a car, they imagine driving it off the lot tomorrow. That immediate gratification lights up certain brain regions intensely. But old Mercedes owners get excited thinking about the long game, about having a car that runs perfectly in 10 years because they maintained it right. This trait shows up in other areas of their lives too. Research suggests people with high delayed gratification tend to have better financial stability. They save more, they invest wisely, they don't make impulse purchases they'll regret. Their relationships often last longer because they're willing to work through difficulties instead of jumping ship when things get hard. It's about executive function. That's the part of your brain that manages impulses and plans for the future. Old Mercedes drivers have strong executive function. They can override the temptation of something new and shiny because they understand something deeper. Real satisfaction doesn't come from quick hits of novelty. It comes from commitment, patience, and seeing something through over time. There's a quiet revolution happening, and old Mercedes drivers are part of it. They've stepped off what psychologists call the consumer treadmill, that endless cycle of buy, use, discard, repeat. And here's what research shows: they're happier for it. This is voluntary simplicity in action. It's not about deprivation, it's about finding satisfaction in what you already have. These people get genuine joy from maintaining rather than acquiring, from fixing rather than replacing, and that completely rewrites how their brain experiences pleasure. Studies on minimalism and sustainable consumption reveal something fascinating. People who resist constant upgrading report lower anxiety levels. They sleep better. They feel more in control of their lives. Old Mercedes drivers embody this perfectly. While others stress about car payments and depreciation, they're content with something paid off and appreciating in value. But there's also an interesting tension here. These are luxury cars, German engineering at its finest. So these owners have found a way to appreciate quality while rejecting wastefulness. They've resolved what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. They can love fine things without feeding into throwaway culture. Environmental values play a role too. Keeping a well-built car running for 30 years is more sustainable than buying new every few years. These drivers understand that. They're living their values instead of just talking about them. At the end of the day, this is about authenticity. Old Mercedes drivers have figured out something most people struggle with their whole lives: how to live according to personal values rather than societal expectations. They've chosen substance over image, longevity over trends, and real satisfaction over temporary excitement. That's not just smart, that's psychological freedom.